Welcome to Stop Overthinking, the podcast for overthinkers, people pleasers, and perfectionists who want to feel calm and confident enough to handle whatever life sends your way. I'm your host, Kristen Odegaard, a women's life and mindset coach, lifelong educator, and recovering perfectionist. Welcome to episode 31 of the Stop Overthinking podcast on clean and dirty pain. This is a whole new topic, and I am excited to listen to this week. This recording is a little bit different in the sense that it is a pre-recording of a live session that I did with a small group several months ago. So I just want to preface this that the audio is not always a great quality. You will hear my dog's collar jingling a little bit in the background, and I knocked over a pile of papers at one point and I couldn't edit all of that out. So thanks for bearing with me. Remember that B- work sometimes is just fine in the sense that we don't always have to be perfect. So I am releasing some of my perfectionism because it's a great message and I'm excited to share it with you. This clean and dirty pain often comes with grief, maybe breakups, loss, life transitions, things that you didn't ask for in particular are very common with this kind of thing. And the topic came up from a conversation that I was having with my coach this past week. So I'll talk about that a little bit later on. I just want to give you some background into this concept as a whole. So when I first learned about this, it's often taught, like I said, about with loss and grief. Breakups are very common. Most people have been through one, even if you haven't lost a loved one or haven't had a life transition in particular that would spurn this. But most people have been through a breakup in their life. So most of the time we think of these as being painful, and they can even have, physical manifestations where people get sick or maybe lose weight and can't eat, or there's pain in different parts of their body. And the idea is that really it doesn't have to be that way. It goes back to kind of the Buddhist term of pain is inevitable, but the suffering is optional. And it comes from how we're thinking about it, what we're making it mean. So it's not that's why some people can kind of cruise through a breakup and be like, yep, this is fine. I'm moving on. Life is good. This is the best thing for me. And other people can't. It's how they're thinking about it. And of course, if you are following me, you know that pretty much everything I talk about is how you are thinking about it. So one of my mentor coaches, Cara Lowenthal, uses a acronym ABCD to talk about allowing pain in this sense. So the A stands for allow, B is bad feelings, C is to carry the clean pain, and D is to ditch the dirty pain. So we're going to talk about what that means in that ABCD sense of how you are moving through some feelings. Kind of taking it with that breakup sort of a sense for now, and then I'll talk how it applies in other areas as we go on as well. So allow is the A. And for this part, we want to allow your negative feelings. And one of the most common things that people do when they have these negative feelings, so A and B are going together, allowing these bad feelings, because we don't want to feel them. Like, it doesn't feel good, or I'm going to get sucked into it and it's never going to go away. You just push them away or think I shouldn't feel this way. You're not going to die or have harm from processing the feeling through your body. Okay. Yes, there are other nervous system responses and other things with that, but just the actual feeling, the sensation in your body, the vibrations in your body is fairly harmless. Our brains still like to think that we're being chased by a tiger. So it just puts us into that, fight or flight mode, and we can't deal with it. And that just isn't the case anymore. So allowing the feelings, allowing, the rejection or being alone. It doesn't mean that you have been abandoned forever. You're not going to die alone in a jungle like our primal brain, thinks that we're going to. We know that this was biologically related, and that's how humans evolved. But really, we're now a couple of, a generation removed from that. And so it hasn't been that long. Our brains haven't caught up because even, up through the times of people having to, harvest their own food and living out on the prairie, or that's not an issue. So we just need to allow these things to happen. And I've done other things about how to process the feeling, but we just need to stop resisting, stop pushing it away. It is challenging, and it really comes down to mental willingness. That's the challenging part, is telling yourself that I can handle this. We want to be tense, and negotiate with reality. And basically, we're pushing it away because we're anticipating that I'm going to feel bad. And so we're pushing it away and pushing away, that I don't want to feel this badness. And so instead, you're just pushing it away and dealing with it. It compounds it and makes it worse. And so we have to be willing to just say, what if I just let this come? And one of the analogies that I like with this, I like lots of analogies and metaphors. You've probably figured that out. So, like in martial arts, or even for seniors, like teaching people how to fall. If you are going to have an impact, they talk about staying loose. If you are tense and you are tight, you're brittle and you don't bend and you just smack the ground. So they teach people how to fall, how to absorb impact. And it's about staying loose to be able to absorb that, so that you can fall softly and be flexible and adjust. And that's what we need to do when allowing emotions as well, is to stay soft, to not tense up, to stay soft, to let it go through there, absorb it, because it really only is about 90 seconds, and then let it go. So with those emotions, you don't need to tell yourself it's wrong, that it's not supposed to happen. We know that we need to process them out. So that's the A and B, is allowing the bad. The C part and D part is kind of newer for what we're talking about, in the sense of pain. So everybody knows what pain is like: physical pain, emotional pain. That clean pain, in this sense, is basically the negative emotions that we want to feel. So there's times when you want to feel sad, that if someone dies, that's appropriate. You want to be able to empathize if maybe a friend loses a child, or something else bad or traumatic happens. That we know that these feelings of pain and hurt are part of the whole human experience. We know that in order to have the highs up here and experience the good stuff, the opposite is true. And otherwise, if we limit it and we don't want to feel the bad stuff, we shorten our whole range of emotion. So to be able to have the really good stuff, you've got to be able to feel the bad stuff and be able to flow through that. So clean pain is, those things happen there, and there's not a list of emotions. Like if somebody dies, or if somebody gets hurt or diagnosed with something serious, that this is what you need to feel. And so there's no shame, there's no judgment. You are just going through those like clean water, and it flows through you. It's clear, it's clean, it's pure. And just like water, it's going to ebb and flow. So when you have that pain, there's like waves, and you can breathe and you can function in between it. It might be hours, it might be days, it might be weeks before those other waves come again, but it ebbs and flows as we are adjusting to life, with this new transition, with this loss, with this sadness that you're feeling. Dirty pain. Okay. And so this is a newer concept. Dirty pain is kind of the opposite of clean pain. It is stuck, clogged, murky water. Instead of it coming at you in waves, it's like you are just there and it's unbearable. You're like agitated and tense, and you just want to escape it. Dirty pain is often associated with suffering. So not pain, but suffering. And so the difference in how you get here, is how you're feeling your emotions, is the way that you are talking to yourself, how you are interpreting these things, what you're making it mean. And so that clean pain just kind of flows through, that these are the emotions, and that I'm sad, or maybe this is bittersweet as I remember some things. It could even be a deep hurt or rejection, but we know that that happens and you come through it. It is something that you are resisting so hard that you're like fighting with reality, probably associated with anger or shame or resistance or self-loathing. Okay, so you're pushing away. I shouldn't feel this way. This is terrible. How can I think this? Why aren't I past this? How come I can't get over it? Why can't I just move on? And so instead of just having the pain by itself and letting it process, you're heaping this other stuff on top of it. And it's different in the sense that if it's a clean, like that clean pain that you're experiencing, like we talked about, it ebbs and flows, and generally over time it lessens and moves through your life, moves through your body. Vicious cycle. Dirty pain might be associated with even hate of another person, in the sense of a breakup, or something. Even if it was back to middle school days, I'm sure you can remember that, just those intense feelings, and your mind is just going and spinning and looking for all of the reasons that this other person is the problem, and your brain might, you're taking it personally, and you're taking that rejection. You think that you're not good enough and I never will be. It's that I'm going to die alone and nobody will ever love me, and I'm not good enough and I'm not worthy to be loved. Are wrapping that up. It can be about yourself, it can be about the other person and judging them and their character, and maybe making you feel morally righteous and superior. So it's taking what are normal feelings associated with loss and grief, and then just mucking it up with all of these other things. Our brains do this. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a matter of being able to recognize it, and when you are stuck, to be able to work through it. Because this thought pattern in a dirty pain, this anger, shame, despair, you're projecting into the future of doom and gloom, arguing that this wasn't supposed to happen, it shouldn't be this way, he shouldn't have done that, I should have done this, decisions should have made differently, and it goes nowhere. It's overwhelming, it's exhausting, it's heavy. You literally can't do anything else, kinds of things. And over time you feel worse because it is heavy and you're fighting it and going on. So every day you're looking for reasons and rationale, and these terrible predictions about you or the other person. And of course your brain is going to find what you're thinking about and looking for, so you just stay in this pattern over and over and over again. Okay, so that's kind of the overview of like a clean and dirty pain scenario. Basically, dirty pain is the suffering that we create for ourselves, versus a clean pain is basic, pure human emotion and being able to process it. Dirty pain is regret, suffering, and blaming. And clean pain is just experiencing what is. So I had this past week, and I was going through these scenarios, and I have to give you a little bit of background just so you know where I'm coming from. So I get into these cycles every once in a while where where I get really angry, where I'm blaming things, and kind of arguing with reality. I can generally see that fairly quickly and go, okay, this is anger, it's really hurt, or it's loneliness, or something that's underneath, rejection. Because I have a couple of trigger points that where this generally comes up. And thinking that I'm recognizing this, I'm coaching myself through it. Maybe I'll journal, maybe I'll cry, kind of process it. A lot of this is centered around like 5 years ago in 2018. So end of 2017, I'm going through a divorce process that I didn't want. My husband at the time was having an affair. I was really frustrated, wanted him there was a lot of drama. I'll just say that with the divorce process. Okay. After that finalized, part of our piece was I needed to sell our house because he wanted half of the equity from the house that I had been living in when we had separated. As I'm going through that, and 2018, the housing market was still pretty tight. My mom was diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer and given 3 to 6 months to live. I had asked for an extension and to not be able to put the house on the market because I didn't want to have to deal with selling and moving and doing when my mom had 3 to 6 months to live. That was an adamant no. So I'm going through the stress of trying to do this. My mom lives locally and spend time with her, do that, all of the things. My kids are having a really hard time. There was just a shit show going on in my life. My mom lasted 4 months and 2 days until she died. And the last 3 weeks she was spent working with my counselor the whole time. But it was overwhelming. Like the grief of all of that was super overwhelming. And I could only handle it, it would come in waves like it was supposed to. And I'd handle it little pieces and little pieces. So the year goes on. Within 6 months, my dad decides to date. Within a year, he has somebody else moved in, and there was just stuff after stuff that kept happening. And there were so many pieces, like so many things that got built up within me, even though I was trying to work through it and I was discovering coaching at this point, working with my therapist. I never really got to process all of it. Like I would keep dealing with the surface kinds of things, but so much had piled up, I didn't get to it. So here we are 5 years later, and I still have kind of a mess of emotions to deal with in this whole thing. And of course, other things have happened since then. And and in my mind, I'm like, nobody wants to hear about this anymore. It's been 5 years. This is stupid. So when these things come up, and like I said, tends to be anger, and I want to blame my ex-husband. I want to get mad at my dad. I needed to move 1,400 miles away and abandon me here without any extended family. I have all of these stories, and I'm like, oh, Kristen, those are stories. You should just be happy, and, we're healthy, and you don't need to feel that way anymore. So all of that to say that my coach, who knows some of that, and she just said, Kristen, what are you doing to process the old emotions? You're doing okay on the surface with the stuff that's coming up. But now you're starting to tell yourself that now you're adding in the dirty pain. What was clean pain, you have made dirty in these last couple of months because you are not allowing it anymore. There is no timeline on this grief. There is no roadmap for whatever happened to me that says this is the amount of time you get to be able to deal with this. And then you don't get to be sad or angry or resentful anymore. There is no timeline. And by trying to tell yourself that, you're just pushing it down and pushing it down. And so at this point, kind of like things compound and grow, what was this big now over years has mushroomed, and it's still sitting there inside you, and you are pushing it down and pushing it down. What are you going to do to deal with this? And of course, my first instinct was like, oh, but here's the beauty of having a coach. Because I know this, I know these tools, I can recognize that, but I wasn't seeing my own blind spots. I've worked with a therapist, hundreds of hours with my therapist in the past 6 years. And the difference between the therapist and the coach is she talks, I talk, I let it all out, at least with mine, and she's wonderful. She knows all the junk, probably the only one who knows all the junk, and tells me, yep, you're valid and you can do that. But I've never actually, she knows how much I'm struggling with this, and there has never been any way to move through it. Like, why am I, even the thought of making it, like, why am I still here, which is legit. And it's because I'm resisting it and pushing it down and all those things. And that has not come to light at all in years of therapy. And so that's why the two can really work well together in terms of processing and moving forward. Not everybody needs both. But in this sense, my coach was able to kind of shine a light on it. Here's your light, and this is why you're making it worse. This is why years later you're still dwelling on this. Because you haven't processed it, and by telling yourself that I should be past this by now, I shouldn't still be thinking about this, I shouldn't have to deal with this anymore. So It's was just a really good reminder for me of because there's periods I'll go without a coach as well, or I'll focus on business aspects for a while and not other things, on why this is so important. Because even with some of these tools, we just don't see it ourselves. And this is something that obviously I have been dealing with in my own way and has gotten a lot better. Believe me, it's gotten a lot better over these years, but I was missing this one really important piece. The other thing that the coach just really needed to remind me of is that all of these circumstances, whether it was selling the house, divorce, the affair, mom dying, dad having a new partner, dad moving, all of these things, the circumstances are completely neutral. It's how I'm choosing to think about them, how I am attached to that story about it. Because all of these things happened, and it's completely different. If you didn't know those people in my life, those things still happened and you have no thoughts about them, or at least not the way I do. My next door neighbor or my parents' next door neighbor who knew those and they were close friends, still have completely different aspects about all of that stuff than I do. So it's how I'm choosing to think about it. And there's pieces, and that's where a lot of my coaching work has gone in. Like, how can I see this differently? I'm not going to lie to myself. I'm not layering on toxic positivity. I'm not saying it all happened for a reason, because that just doesn't resonate with me. So I find these little pieces of what else is true. And I slowly can start working through those stories and that pain, because by continuing to think about it the way I think about it, it keeps me stuck. It's that dirty pain where I'm just so attached to my story, when other things can also be true. I could tell this story with all of those same events without emotion, or make them all sound wonderful and rosy. And some of that would be true. It's just the way that my brain wants to search and be attached to some of those thoughts and some of those things. A quote that I have to remind myself about every once in a while is by Byron Katie. And she says, when you argue with reality, you will lose, but only 100% of the time. And that's true. So you can argue about all of these things that happened. And the reality is that they were just events. It's what I'm making it mean. It's how I'm choosing to interpret it. It's me thinking about the shame and blame, and I'm not good enough, and I'm not worthy enough, and all of that stuff that gets layered in there. So I'm making it mean that something is wrong with me. I'm taking negative meaning, layering on, there's something wrong with me. And I just keep looking for proof that there is, or there's something wrong with the other people. And I can give you all sorts of reasons why there is. And then the other thing that just kind of keeps us stuck there is just that we're projecting into the future, this unhappy future, and we are going to continue to blame it on these circumstances, when that's not the case at all. The circumstances just happened. It's our thoughts about those. We can have completely different, no matter what our thoughts were about the past, we can have completely different thoughts about the future. And sometimes we forget that. And I do too. So just wanted to talk about this tonight. Please, if you do have, after you watch this and maybe you had some time to think about it and to process it, and if there has been a loss, a transition, some grief in your life, even if it's been years ago, you might be able to say, oh, that's why it took me so long to get through that. Or it, again, is just something to file away, that when you are trying to resist these emotions, saying that I shouldn't be feeling this way, you're really making it worse for yourself. All right, so heavier topic tonight, but this is the reality of what we do. We all have these ups and downs. And again, that is one of the great things that I have found through coaching. A lot of people, we go into it, we want to feel happier, we want to feel calmer, we want to feel better. in order to do that, again, to reach those highs, we've got to be able to feel those lows too, so that there's some perspective between the two. And when you allow those instead of resisting them, you move through them faster. And then you just know that the next wave is coming, and it's a whole lot easier to absorb. It's like being able to loosen up your body so that you don't hit and break on impact, that you're able to kind of like roll out of it, so to speak. I'm still practicing that, of course, with certain thoughts in particular. And there might be areas where you can see this in your life, or just other places that you're feeling stuck. And of course, I am always here to help you, to work with you. I work in a 12-week personalized coaching program. So there's concepts that are universal that somehow get woven in over that piece. But each session is really tailored to what you need at that point in time, what kind of tools that would best work for you in that moment, and giving you a whole different perspective and an emotional vocabulary, an emotional mindset and agility that you haven't learned before. And there's nothing wrong with that. We just haven't learned it. And so getting this toolbox and having access to it, like, literally is, if you need glasses, and finally getting the right prescription and being able to see things clearly. Everything just makes so much more sense. You feel more confident and in control. You can see where you're going better. You can see where you've been. It is just a whole different perspective. So if that is something that you are considering, hop on a free consult call with me. It's 45 minutes on Zoom, and it's not a pressure sales call. I want you to be really comfortable and confident with whatever decision you make. Maybe this isn't the right time for coaching for you. Maybe I'm not the right. Thank you for listening to the Stop Overthinking podcast with Kristen Odegaard. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who would benefit from the message. To learn more about working with me and links to social media and free resources, head over to my website, coachwithkristen.com. That's Kristen spelled Kristen. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. Have a great week.